Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take complex, compelling source material and really analyze it down to its essential, sometimes surprising truths.
And today, we are really immersing ourselves in a collection of narratives that, they completely redefine the concept of a bedtime story.
Yeah, we're talking about relationship psychology that is so dark, so twisted. It honestly challenges everything we think we know about female desire and agency.
That's right. Our material today comes from Nancy Madore's collection, Enchanted Again, more erotic bedtime stories for women.
And if you're expecting typical, happily ever after fantasies.
Think again. This is a deep dive into 6 distinct excerpts, all using these really familiar nursery rhyme titles.
Like Little Miss Muffet and Humpty Dumpty.
Exactly. And they're used as springboards for these incredibly intricate, intense, and frankly, often dangerous fictional narratives.
All centered on power, manipulation, and just profound emotional conflict.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. We aren't here for like a simple summary of shocking plot points.
No, not at all.
The sources detail these really deep psychological conflicts where the protagonists, well, they repeatedly choose this kind of volatile extremism over what you might call conventional stagnant safety.
Precisely. Our mission here is critical. We need to analyze the psychological journeys, the relationship patterns across all 6 of these stories and look for the common threads.
Right.
What is it that drives these female protagonists to seek satisfaction through such extreme means? We see these patterns emerging.
Infidelity, outright manipulation.
Extreme submission, and in some cases even, catastrophic terminal confrontation.
And for you, the curious learner, our lens is going to be focused entirely on those surprising motivations, the emotional conflicts that are really underpinning all these choices. We want to understand those critical, pivotal moments where a protagonist feeling totally overlooked or vulnerable finds that powerlessness just morphs into this intense, sometimes terrifying form of agency.
We are definitely skipping the gentle lullaby.
Yeah, and getting straight to the core conflict.
So let's start with theme 1. This is the intense search for intensity, and specifically how it's found through absolute submission, usually to an external, often dangerous power.
This quest for, like, an overwhelming validation.
That's it, and it's so vividly captured in the stories Birds of a Feather and Desperate Dan.
Let's jump in with Pansy and Birds of a Feather. Her starting point is so crucial because it really establishes the baseline of her emotional starvation.
Absolutely. She's trapped in a marriage with Tom.
And Tom is a special kind of awful. The text describes him as angry, arrogant, bitter.
And just fundamentally oblivious to her existence. He's characterized by his lack of truth, his consuming self-interest. It's because of him that Pansy feels utterly overlooked by most men.
She's invisible in her own life.
Completely. And that emotional starvation, well, it's the fuel for everything that follows. She's reached a point where any form of intense attention, even if it's negative, is better than anonymity.
So when Jack or John Foreman enters the scene at the coffee shop, he doesn't just flirt with her.
No, he breaks through that anonymity with this persistent, intimate attention. He offers what the text calls a copious feast for her undernourished sense of self.
And that level of focused, unwavering personal validation, it just instantly bypasses any normal ethical or moral reservations she might have had about infidelity.
And that intimate attention, it just facilitates immediate and total physical submission.
Yeah.
The moment they're in the hotel room, there's no pretense, there's no hesitation.
Right.
Jack strips her expertly without even breaking their kiss. He establishes dominance, but in a way that also provides a release for her.
And Pansy finds herself left in what's described as a wonderfully vulnerable sensation of simply submitting to another's pleasure.
Yeah, feeling a primal tightening in her womb. It's like she's liberated from the burden of her own desires by being commanded.
But the dynamic, it shifts very quickly. It goes from that liberating physical submission to something else, a required painful psychological submission.
Yeah. It does. He pushes her onto her knees and elbows on a dirty hotel room floor. And the initial lashings, they're described as stunning and painful. They freeze her desire instantly.
And this is where the core pathology of this story reveals itself. I think for you, the learner, this is a really crucial insight.
It is. The shift from that frozen desire to overwhelming pleasure is achieved only when Jack connects the punishment directly to her low self-esteem.
What does he say?
He essentially tells her that this pain is necessary because she has done, quote, nothing but put yourself down all the way over here.
So the punishment isn't just arbitrary. He frames it as a kind of corrective justice for her own internalized self-loathing.
Exactly. And Pansy has to actively beg for more punishment. She has to say the words, "I need you to punish me some more."
Wow.
And only then can she achieve the full amount of pleasure. This is the moment of agency within total submission.
It's so twisted.
By admitting this perverse need, by accepting that her self-deprecation requires this extreme external force, she achieves this psychological breakthrough that causes her soul and sex glands to contract.
So the profound pleasure is completely inextricably linked to the pain.
And the public, verbal admission of her deepest, most hidden need for that external validation.
But as often happens in these high-stakes narratives, the whole dynamic just collapses.
It does, when the identity reveal hits.
Pansy's delivering lunch to Tom at the police precinct, the husband she loathes, and she sees Jack's photo on the desk.
And he is John Foreman, the wife killer, Tom's current obsession.
The initial horror over the murder accusation is almost immediately supplanted by a deeper despair, right? It's about her identity.
Absolutely. Pansy realizes Jack pursued her solely because she was Tom's wife. She asked this agonizing question. What did he ultimately want from her?
Her sense of being used, of being just a means to an end for Tom's accuser, it just strips away all the validation she thought she had gained.
She's invisible once again, just a tool in a larger destructive scheme.
And this overwhelming sense of despair and being used, ironically, that's what leads to the most shocking and toxic act of agency in the entire collection.
She chooses destruction.
She shoots Jack.
And her reaction isn't panic. It isn't remorse. It's meticulous, focused calculation.
She immediately forms a plan to frame her estranged husband, Tom.
Yes. She uses his car. She wears his oversized clothes over her own. She gets his gun, his police keychain to unlock the door.
She is systematically exploiting Tom's known history of harassment issues.
And the existing bias his peers already have against him. The text confirms that the police, being cut from the same cloth as him, they immediately fixate on Tom's guilt.
Her final sentiment just encapsulates this twisted sense of triumphant justice.
What is it?
How perfectly just that Tom should feel the burn of being accused for something he didn't do.
Wow. So she weaponized her own suffering, her infidelity, the subsequent betrayal, into a mechanism for ultimate revenge against the man who had effectively erased her existence.
It's agency achieved through terminal destruction. Just total.
Okay, now let's pivot to Desperate Dan, where that search for intensity and belonging, it manifests very differently.
Right. Claire's journey isn't driven by revenge. It's more of a yearning for genuine, deep connection.
Even if that connection is unconventional and clinically controlled.
Claire moves to this isolated town, Animus, North Dakota, and she's seeking a clean slate after what she felt was a shallow life in Chicago.
Her previous engagement just sort of fizzled out with very little fanfare, left her with few real connections. So Animus represents this childhood mantra of peace she had.
But she's really searching for a place where she can finally belong, establish lifelong connections.
She finds a superficial community connection pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But the real enigma is Dan, the local Mr. Fix-It.
Desperate Dan, the dirty old man. That's what they call him.
Right. And Claire is intensely aware of his glassy blue stare that projects this desperation. It gives her the creeps, yet she's strangely, undeniably drawn to him.
She tries to ignore him, but his presence just lingers. It signals this deep, primal attraction to what he represents.
Yeah, outsider.
The forbidden.
And their relationship, if you can call it that, it completely bypasses conventional interaction. It starts with this shock delivery.
An anonymous, handmade gift. The text describes an enlarged, expertly carved, malleable phallic sculpture.
And it's fixed with a metal nut and bolt. This immediate personalization, the fact that it was handcrafted specifically for her, that's key.
Her initial reaction is outrage. She grabs the phone, she's going to call the police.
But that intention is just instantly overridden by an alarmingly aroused state.
She finds the object beyond unthinkable, but she uses it, and finds the pleasure all-consuming and nearly painful.
And the eroticism is heightened by her visualization, right? The text notes, she closes her eyes and sees precisely Dan's intense gaze watching her as she touched it with her tongue.
The psychological payoff is tied directly to that imagined voyeurism, the feeling of total, undivided attention. I want to pause on that personalization for a second. The nut and bolt are mentioned so explicitly.
They are. They're placed there intentionally to remind her that there was more than just the phallus-like sculpture.
It's a promise. A riddle suggesting some kind of mechanical extension or utility.
Exactly. And her desire, which is already intense, it becomes neglected when she can't figure out the puzzle.
And that frustration drives her to actively seek answers, which leads her to the typist, Brenda's, house.
And the deep connection Claire craved is revealed through a window into a hidden, controlled, shared secret.
What she witnesses is just astonishing. Brenda, fully nude and splayed on a low table, is motionless, helpless against a motorized dildo machine.
Controlled by Dan.
Controlled by Dan. The machine, this complex tripod contraption, is connected by a long metal arm to a sculptor just like Claire's.
Fastened by a matching nut and bolt.
Yep. And Dan controls the speed with a lever. Brenda is motionless, apparently helpless to move against its power.
And what does Claire feel?
Wickedly envious and powerfully aroused by the sight. This is the moment Claire realizes the true nature of the community she's joined.
It's not about emotional vulnerability, is it?
Not at all. It's about a highly technical, controlled form of outsourced sexual gratification.
So the revelation isn't just about the machine itself. It's about the fact that Dan's specialized services are a shared secret ritual in Animus.
Exactly. She later sees Dan leaving the diner owner's house with his toolbox. This confirms the implication.
Multiple women in the community benefit from this extreme, yet seemingly consensual, form of mechanical devotion.
What's really fascinating here is the social aspect of it. Dan actually catches Claire watching.
He does, and he confirms his actions. He even laughs about it, which is the first sign of amusement she has ever seen from him.
When he offers to help her enjoy it to its fullest potential, she calls him a pervert.
But her voice is clearly full of anguish. Her protests are so weak against her mounting desire, and more importantly, against her yearning for acceptance and belonging.
And that desire for belonging, it ultimately wins out. When she finally sees him again at the diner, she can barely speak.
She doesn't ask him.
No, she demands he come to her house. She's accepting that this is the place where she belonged.
For Claire, this highly controlled, community-sanctioned mechanical devotion provided the deep connection and attention she never found in conventional city life.
She submitted to a machine and a ritual, but she gained the validation she craved so desperately.
The contrast between Pansy and Claire is just profound. Pansy uses extreme submission as this temporary bridge to revenge and agency.
She transforms herself from victim to perpetrator.
Right, whereas Claire embraces extreme submission as a permanent pathway to community fulfillment. She recognizes that this bizarre controlled ritual is the only authentic form of connection that's available to her.
That was an astonishing journey. Looking at those two extremist motivations, it really makes you question what kind of validation is even possible when conventional relationships fail so completely. So let's look now at theme 2, the double edge of intentional control.
Okay, this is where the protagonists actively engineer their relationship dynamics. They're using manipulation, suspicion, psychological warfare to achieve a desired outcome.
We'll analyze Daphne in Georgie Porgy, and then Joyce in Peter Pumpkin Eater.
In Georgie Porgy, Daphne's actions are purely reactive. They're driven by this immense humiliation.
Georgie had pursued her relentlessly. She finally gives in for one night.
And then he ghosts her, leading to this deeply embarrassing confrontation where she finds him semi-nude with another woman.
She's left seething with indignant anger. And that anger needs a target, not a resolution.
That humiliation is the catalyst. It's why she seeks outside help, finding Julia, the unconventional hypnotist.
And Julia proposes the mechanism for the hex, mailing Georgie a neatly wrapped little package.
Just a simple lighter.
Right, but it acts as a psychological anchor for the manipulation.
And the hex works instantly. Perfectly. It targets his vulnerability, his ego. Georgie becomes totally obsessed, unable to perform sexually with anyone else.
He's convinced he's deeply in love.
They enjoy this delirious weekend, a seemingly perfect honeymoon phase, where Daphne is just thriving on his inexhaustible attentions. The text says she was never so happy in her life.
Why?
Because she had secured his total emotional focus.
But here's where that intentional control backfires and creates a far more volatile dynamic.
It does. Georgie, maybe subconsciously knowing the change was too abrupt, he guesses her simple password.
Which was Georgie.
Of course. And he finds the emails detailing the manipulation, confirming that the lighter was the mechanism.
His reaction is monumental. It's a cold rage that completely transforms their relationship.
He's mentally incapacitated. He can't get hard without her, and he can't stop getting hard when she is near.
So their sex becomes purely an exercise in maliciousness.
It's intended to mortify and mistreat her.
Yeah.
He forces her face down, saying, "I don't want to look at you," using angry penetration and violent thrusts.
But the perverse genius of Daphne's pathology is that she finds satisfaction even in this abuse.
She willingly submits to his harsh demands, even the harrowing things, because she believes her absolute acquiescence will eventually make him forgive her.
The text says the grueling difficulty of his treatment gives her a delightfully perverse satisfaction.
It's toxic, but it satisfies the need that initially drove her,
The need for his complete, all-consuming energy to be focused solely on her.
even if that energy is pure hatred.
This is that double edge of manipulative control you mentioned. The relationship is secured, but it morphs into this cycle where Georgie goes from hating her to yearning for her to resenting her.
With sex as the destructive chain linking it all together, Daphne is driven by her desire for him to focus all his powerful emotional energy on her, regardless of the pain caused to both of them.
And the ultimate test of that control comes at the very end.
Georgie slowly accepts his fate. His resentment evolves into affection and then love, culminating in this spectacular nervous marriage proposal.
He is totally capitulated. He's offering the ultimate commitment, validating her control completely.
And Daphne, having achieved that total capitulation, she rejects him.
She realizes the goal wasn't the marriage itself or the societal validation of commitment.
No, it was the act of forcing his entire emotional and intellectual output onto her. She admits there was nothing in the world she craved so much as to have all his energies focused on her like this, no matter that she had hurt him to achieve it.
The control was exerted purely for the sake of consuming his emotional capacity. Once consumed, the conquest was over.
Chilling.
Okay, moving on to Joyce in Peter Pumpkin Eater. The control here is achieved not through external hexes, but through constant, masterful psychological deflection.
And maintaining Peter in a perpetual state of doubt. This story, you really have to unpack it carefully because Joyce's brilliance is so subtle.
It's entirely self-contained psychological warfare.
It is. Keter Joyce's relationship is defined by his constant, relentless interrogation about her fidelity. She routinely deletes computer history, purges emails, burns notes to conceal her actions.
Actions that may or may not even be incriminating.
Right. But the need to conceal them is what defines her relationship with him. Peter returns home with an edge to his voice. Everything seems suspect. The confrontation is a mix of dread and anticipation for both of them.
The conflict escalates when Peter finds that charred paper in the wastebasket.
Joyce attempts the soft deflection first. She claims they were just some old notes from Bob, her ex-husband.
Peter presses her, and rightfully so, asking why she would burn notes unless she wanted to be absolutely certain that no one else would read them. He's closing in.
But Joyce's mind, which is described as unfailing in its capacity to manipulate logic, realizes she needs a defense that is undeniable.
One that's rooted in his guilt.
Exactly. She weaponizes their shared history. She deflects Peter's anger by suggesting her secretive behavior, the burning notes, immediately washing clothes, was all due to the controlling habits he forced her to adopt.
When they were having an affair during her marriage to Bob.
Yes. She turns his controlling tendencies and his own past infidelity into the justification for her current actions. She knows he can't deny the premise.
He can't argue that she wasn't forced to be secretive without admitting he wasn't controlling.
And he can't admit that without unraveling the foundation of their entire relationship.
Peter is momentarily stunned into silence. He's torn between his anger, which wants to take hold, and his desire, which is grasping at the doubt she has so cleverly manufactured.
And that doubt is the engine of his desire. His simmering anger and deep suspicion only increase the passion and the intensity of his subsequent actions.
So during their intense lovemaking, where he's grabbing her hair, kissing her violently, this competitive oral sex Peter is constantly anguished.
He's consumed by the question, was this how she responded with Bob when she returned home from an afternoon in my bed?
And Joyce understands this dynamic perfectly. She delights in his brusque handling, preferring it to indifference.
The intensity of his suspicion is appealing to her because it keeps him engaged, obsessed, and fundamentally trapped.
She's content in the state of desire and doubt. She realizes her ultimate power lies in keeping him there, never confirming, never denying.
And her success in maintaining this psychological warfare is captured in her internal, secret revision of the nursery rhyme.
Peter, Pumpkin Eater, had a wife and couldn't keep her. He put her in a pumpkin shell, and there she kept him very well.
Joyce has successfully incarcerated Peter within the pumpkin shell of his own insecurity and desire. She controls the prison key, and she controls the energy output of the man she chooses to keep.
That level of calculated, sustained manipulation is, frankly, chilling. Let's move into theme 3 now: reaction, fantasy, and terminal consequences.
So we're looking at what happens when the women attempt to change the relationship dynamic through impulsive reaction or sexual fantasy, rather than through proactive manipulation.
This includes Little Miss Muffet and Humpty Dumpty.
In Little Miss Muffet, Jessica is trapped with Steve, a man who is physically adept, described as having sinewy and capable hands, but who is emotionally detached.
He avoids commitment while demanding loyalty. He made her promise not to see anyone else, but refused to solidify their future.
Jessica hates the game, but she lacks the stamina to change it. She's exhausted by his highly controlled nature and his constant avoidance of meaningful, future-focused conversation.
The spark of change comes when she meets Derek, a charming stranger in the park.
She feels inordinately flattered by his attention and humor. She's contrasting him sharply with Steve, whose detached manner is suddenly revealed to her as profound selfishness.
This encounter, it catalyzes a fantasy life.
That new encounter leads to a desperate sexual fantasy. Later, during sex with Steve, who is described as aggressively controlled and slow-paced,
Jessica fantasizes about Derek taking her violently while Steve watches.
it's her desperate subconscious means to incite passion and make Steve lose control.
She physically tries to provoke Steve, nipping him, running her nails down his back, hoping to break his composure.
But Steve maintains remarkable control. He just holds her hands securely at her sides and continues his slow, easy strokes.
Utterly bewildering her with his composure.
The fantasy fails. It only serves to highlight the immense emotional gap and the depth of Steve's self-possession.
So, driven by the failure of the fantasy and her surging anger, Jessica finally confronts Steve about their non-committal future. She's hoping to scare him into action.
Instead, he calmly announces, "You were the woman that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with," and walks out.
He tells her he doesn't have time for her games. He completely flips the script, making her desperation look like frivolous relationship drama.
This loss, combined with the humiliation, drives her into a panic. Her guilt over the fantasy and her impulsiveness leads her to call Derek to cancel their date.
And that's when Derek turns hostile in the parking lot. He accuses her of using him to piss your boyfriend off.
And then he says, "Whatever you get, you've got it coming to you."
The psychological leap for Jessica is immediate and terrifying.
She links Derek, the angry, disposable fling, to the park killer who leaves spider carvings on his victims.
The confluence of her guilt, the fantasy of violence, and Derek's threat makes her instantly believe she has just encountered a dangerous murderer.
She rushes away, planning to call the police, but then realizes she has no evidence of a crime. Only her own fear and this overwhelming sense of self-incrimination.
But here is the truly shocking and devastating twist, which defines the story's terminal consequence.
After deleting Jessica's remorseful voicemail, Steve, the reserved, meticulous, non-committal boyfriend, the man of remarkable control, is seen in a cold rage.
And he's meticulously finishing carving his signature spider mark into the cold, lifeless flesh of the woman waiting beside him.
The killer was Steve all along.
This flips the entire narrative. It exposes the chilling nature of control.
Jessica's fear of the external charismatic danger, Derek, was a complete deflection from the meticulous, controlled, clinical evil she was sharing a bed with.
Steve's remarkable control in the bedroom wasn't a sign of restraint or devotion.
It was the chilling, professional self-possession of a serial killer, maintaining his identity while performing intimacy.
What's truly profound here is the consequence. Jessica's attempt to gain agency by creating a fantasy and dating another man led directly to the end of their relationship.
And potentially saved her life.
Right. While condemning the woman who happened to be next in line, her failure to communicate conventionally was her accidental salvation.
Okay, now let's look at Sandra and Humpty Dumpty. The collapse here is internal and relational rather than criminal, but it's equally terminal to the relationship itself.
Sandra meets Joe when he's drunk and pining for his ex, Elaine. Sandra immediately idealizes him. She starts fine-tuning the memory of their first encounter,
changing it in her mind to the third date.
Right, and she convinces herself that she is invaluable to him, a savior figure. She subsists on these small pleasures, ensuring they are regular enough to undermine any evidences of neglect.
She is actively manufacturing her own sense of security.
And the hard truth is revealed months later. Joe is virtually homeless and living in a hotel after his divorce.
Sandra's solution is to invite him to move in. She rationalizes it as temporary, but silently she's hoping it leads to a partnership.
This is the classic trap, isn't it? The female protagonist doing all the work to force a conventional outcome.
It is. And the core issue remains the emotional distance. Joe is chronically unwilling to discuss his past with Elaine or their future. He's constantly deflecting with evasions like, "I don't have a crystal ball."
He can't bear any negative suggestions against him. He just retreats into emotional self-defense.
And Sandra quickly realizes the more attached she gets, the more afraid she is to push the issue.
Wow.
She has to tread lightly, prioritizing the relationship's survival over her own emotional needs.
She finally erupts in frustration, and crucially, she weaponizes her intellect in this cynical outburst.
She uses complex, almost inaccessible terminology. She asks if he expects her to come up with a brand new theory for solving integral equations or define the elements of an isosceles triangle.
Wait, why is she using math terms? That seems so counterintuitive to expressing an emotional need.
Because she's trying to communicate the complexity, the rigor of her emotional investment, which she feels he constantly trivializes.
So she's saying, my effort here is equivalent to solving differential calculus, and you treat it like an afterthought.
Exactly. It's a desperate intellectual attempt to establish the stakes.
And her attempt to establish the complexity of her emotional need, it backfires instantly because Joe laughs.
He finds her sarcasm funny. He knows her sarcasm means she is close to the end of her outburst, and then he'll be able to reason with her with minimal emotional effort on his part.
That laughter, finding her deepest frustration funny, enrages her further. She grinds out between her teeth the realization that she must try harder while he evaluates her performance.
And this moment of ultimate humiliation is actually her self-respect breakthrough.
When she forces him to answer if he would marry her today, he says the fatal words.
No, but if things were to change, that caveat reveals her entire role in the relationship.
Sandra finally realizes she is expected to do all the work, to try harder, for an indefinite future payoff that may never come.
And she achieves a true, earned sense of self-respect by refusing to play that submissive, self-sacrificing role any longer. She stops the self-sabotage that was born out of her initial idealization.
Her reaction is immediate and decisive. She stops talking, starts collecting his belongings, and forces him out immediately.
Threatening 9/11. Her control here is purely self-protective.
And Joe is left genuinely surprised, confused. He assumed their temporary arrangement was mutually understood. He thought they were just having a good time.
For Sandra, the emotional weight of holding up the relationship had led her to the brink of collapse. Just like Humpty Dumpty on the wall, the only way to put herself back together was to push Joe off the wall herself.
This entire collection gives us a deeply detailed, if profoundly cynical view of modern female desire and relationship pathology.
We've analyzed 6 very different approaches to finding validation and agency in the face of emotional stagnation.
Right.
And if we look at the synthesis, the pervasive pattern is clear. Dissatisfaction in conventional relationships, Com's neglect, Steve's emotional detachment, Peter's lack of trust, Joe's inability to commit.
It drives these women into extreme dynamics where they seek intense, often risky validation.
Their standard psychological toolkit failed them, forcing them into these maladaptive coping mechanisms.
Let's break down that spectrum of control again, because I think understanding these 3 distinct forms is the key takeaway for the learner.
Okay, first, we analyze the external, brutal control. We saw this with Pansy and Jack, and with Claire and Desperate Dan's machine.
This brutal, overwhelming control gave the women an unexpected freedom. It lifted the burden of self-consciousness and judgment.
Right, Pansy needed Jack to externally validate and punish her self-deprecation. Claire required Dan's mechanical, relentless, and publicly sanctioned domination to feel total pleasure and belonging.
The choice to submit became their agency.
Then you have the manipulative control. Daphne used a psychological hex to secure Georgie's obsession, essentially weaponizing his desire against him.
And Joyce used that skilled psychological deflection and weaponized history to secure Peter in his cycle of desire and doubt.
In those cases, the relationship survived, but only because the woman actively created and sustained a volatile environment entirely on her own terms.
And finally, we saw reactive control, which invariably led to catastrophic outcomes.
Jessica's attempt to force a reaction from Steve by introducing an external flirtation resulted in her being dumped and, shockingly, only narrowly avoiding murder by the man she thought she knew.
And Sandra's emotional and intellectual outburst failed to achieve connection. It led to her forcefully ejecting Joe which secured her self-respect but ended the relationship abruptly.
The power of these enchanted narratives is that female satisfaction is rarely achieved through the conventional happily ever after,
It's achieved through securing ultimate power, like Pansy framing Tom,
or absolute submission to intense, all-consuming desire, like Claire.
or successfully achieving total emotional focus from the man, which was Daphne's goal.
The satisfaction is derived from the intensity of the experience, regardless of the ethical cost.
Or, in Sandra's case, securing the self-respect that allows her to choose herself over an indefinite, exhausting pursuit of commitment.
She chooses internal stability over external volatility, but only after nearly being broken by the toxicity of the relationship.
So what stands out to you linking these 6 intense experiences together? What's the common thread?
The underlying, almost universal fear that stability denies a fundamental, profound aspect of female desire. Pansy admits she had never felt such pleasure as she had with Jack, despite the danger.
Claire chose the deeply unnatural and strange life of Animus over the normal but shallow life of Chicago.
Daphne destroyed the man who loved her only after achieving total psychological focus.
So the security and predictability of conventional life, represented by the pre-conflict version of their partners, is consistently framed as synonymous with emotional stagnation or indifference.
It seems that these protagonists repeatedly choose intense, volatile, and dangerous relationships, precisely because those relationships force them to feel, to act, and to claim power in ways that safety and predictability never could.
This raises a really important question for you, the listener, as our final provocative thought.
If the most profound and authentic pleasure, and even self-knowledge, is found only at the limits of acceptable behavior, requiring either manipulation, violence, or total submission to be unlocked.
Does that suggest that conventional, stable relationships inherently deny a fundamental, deeply buried aspect of desire? And if so, what price are people unconsciously paying for choosing safety?
A question worth considering long after this deep dive concludes.
Thank you for joining us today as we explored the enchanted and deeply disturbed narratives of power, punishment, and psychological escapism. We'll see you next time.